John, you want to introduce Ruth?
This is Ruth. Ruth was a student here last year, and she's been very involved in working on chaplaincy type work, and she also has a Course in Miracles group down. She lives in her home in Ardsley, New York, just started. And, she was one of our best students last year. I would say that about every one of them.
Last year we had an extraordinary class.
We did.
And this year,
And this year too.
extraordinary
Yeah.
class.
Actually, go ahead.
This class is
You guys may have noticed this due now. Part of my history has been work in education, so imagine yourself, this scenario, you have been admitted to the hospital. And at admission, you were asked your faith. What would you say? You were also asked if you would like to be visited by a chaplain, and what does this mean to you? So two things. I didn't realize it was quite such a large group, and also didn't know the time frames. So I'd like to give each person a minute to answer the top two questions. Ignore the bottom. But usually when you're in a hospital, well, just imagine how you would feel if you're in the hospital. I might feel scared, apprehensive, powerless, trapped. Those are a couple of things I might feel. So think what you might feel.
You're taking less than a minute.
Okay, less than a minute.
It would take 20 minutes if everybody did.
So your name and the answer to the two questions? Judy?
And actually, it did happen in 2000, and I didn't know what they were asking. I put Protestant, or actually they're looking for your denomination. In those days before HIPAA, they would notify your church. But I didn't, it wasn't clear what they were asking. I wasn't at the time asked about a chaplain, but I would have said yes.
And what does the chaplain mean to you?
I get a spiritual person.
Okay.
I think in the past just for
Sure.
Few things. I'm sorry. My faith would be spirituality.
Okay.
It's certainly not a religion. And
Okay.
would I would like to be visited? Absolutely. I would say yes. And I would just think of someone who's spiritual or someone who's from a church.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also, if I could say spiritual, I would definitely say I would like to see a chaplain, and I also would consider a chaplain a spiritual guide.
My answer would be the same, Ruth.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yes, spiritual. And what would I say? Yes, I would accept any offering if that would be the visit, and whatever that would be a visit, I would accept that.
Okay.
Stephanie, I would say that I believe in the love of God, and that if I were all alone, I would say yes to a chaplain, but if I had someone who was close to me, I would probably rather stick with someone who was close to me.
Okay.
My name is Kay, and I would say I was Christian because Unity is considered a Christian church.
Okay.
And yes, I would like to be visited by a chaplain.
My name is Joan, and I would say I'm a spiritual person, and yes, I would like to be visited by a chaplain.
You gotta speak up for us.
I would say that I'm Quaker fundamentally. I'm Barbara. I would say I was Quaker fundamentally, and that I would like to be visited because I think we really want to have someone to talk to at that point.
Okay.
That actually happened, and I said interfaith, and she said it's not a category.
Yeah, I was wondering.
And I said, well, just make it Protestant, and I said yes to whoever the chaplain is.
Okay.
I'm Carrie, I'm a hospice chaplain, so I won't answer it for me. I will tell you that when my mother was in the hospital, who was Catholic, when the priest came into the room, she yelled, "Get out!" She thought he was coming to do last rites. So.
Right. Larry, do you want to go?
I'm Larry. I probably would say I'm Jewish, but with a yogic outlook. I'd be willing to be visited to talk about spiritual matters with whoever wanted to.
I'm Roger. I would probably answer the first question the way Woody Guthrie did when he was admitted to the hospital, which was he said all.
All the above.
And I'm not sure about fundamentalists, though, that doesn't matter. If I was I would be happy for any chaplain to visit me. I'd be happy for anyone to pray with me. And that would mean, to me, someone who would be willing to pray with me. And it's comfortable praying with me.
Hi, I'm Larry. If I was going to answer accurately, I'd say I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. I know there's no box for that, so I would say I'm non-denominational. I would accept a chaplain, certainly, and that would mean somebody who wants to talk about God in some way.
John, I'd say I'm a Taoist Christian, and yes, I'd welcome a chaplain in the room.
Shanti, I would say I'm interfaith, and I would also add that I'm a miracle worker or a student teacher of the course. And I would hope that would generate some kind of interaction. And then we would move from there. Well, of course, I like to be visited by a chaplain. Why not? I'm sure we can entertain each other.
So ignore this, ignore that one.
Yeah, what does this mean to me?
No, what can you?
No, I know, I mean,
Okay.
you want me to finish off on that line?
Okay.
What does this mean to me? What does this mean? No, seriously, what does this?
Chaplain.
A chaplain. A chaplain.
Oh.
What is,
Unfortunately, too little.
okay. Hopefully,
And then that would be one of the things that I would ask a chaplain to really try to amplify. What makes him different from other formal religious denominations, the rabbi, priest, etc. Thank you.
thank you.
I'm Kathleen. I absolutely would want a chaplain to come visit me if I was in the hospital. And if they asked me what faith, I would say all faiths. Because it wouldn't matter to me whether the chaplain was Jewish, Christian, Islam. It really doesn't matter because they're all coming from a place of love and spirituality if they're in that business and support. And I think support is what I would need the most if I was in the hospital. And not so much, I mean, it's nice to have a family member visit, but a chaplain's job is completely different than a family person coming in. So I would absolutely want a chaplain to visit.
My name's Ken. I feel a personal connection with this question because to me, it leaves me without any idea what any of the answers are. So I start with the bottom. What does it mean to me? I'm looking for someone who will come by in my hospital bed. By the way, I've had frequent flyer miles and hospital attendants here lately. So what it means to be that last line that we're being answered. Anybody with a sense of humor. When they bring their spirituality in with a sense of humor, I'm fine with it. If they don't do that, I'm gracious. And when they're gone, I'm fine with that too. And as for the answer to the first one, I typically go with the flow because it ultimately doesn't matter. So I end up saying things like all or it doesn't matter, or what's the first box, or because they don't typically have time to figure out. And I don't really know what denomination I'm in, and it doesn't matter. Sorry to take so long.
Wendy?
I would say I'm interfaith and spiritual, and I would love to be visited by a chaplain, and a chaplain to me is someone of faith, again, who would pray with me, someone spiritual, who is of love and open to feeling like. I'm Jewish. I consider myself Jewish mostly because of my history as generations past, I'm a Holocaust survivor. My family were Holocaust survivors.
but my faith is really love, and Chaplain came, and I know Chaplain comes because of love, then I would very much enjoy interchange.
I would say that I don't care what flavor, I would just like somebody to talk to.
Okay.
I'm Gary. I would say that I'm faithful and send a chaplain plural every day, send somebody different.
Leave it to God.
Hopefully I won't be there that long.
Okay, I'm Kate. I would say that I'm Christian, but they'll probably be out of it, so wherever Chaplain is, they're just there to give love, be a friend. I'm all for that.
Okay, thank you all for your answers. I'm kind of wondering if maybe in this environment it feels safe to say what your faith is, but there are a lot of people who do not respond to the question, resent the question, conceal. Depending on the hospital you are in or the culture, the census could be practically zero, empty in terms of what the patient's faith is, or fairly complete. I have heard that there are times that Jewish people don't want to say because they're afraid they might be treated differently or some kind of persecution. I think it's the same for people who might not want to say they're Muslim in this country. So not everyone feels comfortable with that question and wants to answer it. So that's one of my first thoughts. But it's one of the first questions you'll get when you come to the hospital and you're admitted. Also, what I learned, I also read the Course in Miracles. I also learned through my journey that it's not a formal official religion. And a lot of the first learnings in the Course in Miracles is everything's a little bit reverse, upside down, backwards than you thought. So if you give a lot of love, not only do you get more love, you give the person love and you get as much or more back. So it's not a loss when you give love. Being a chaplain, understanding what a chaplain is a little bit confusing, a little different than that. And I feel a little self-conscious with hospice chaplain here, and I've had 2 units of CPE, so please bear that in mind. So I'm speaking from my experience, and I would love it if you would maybe share stories or whatever as I go, though I don't have a lot of time. So chaplaincy as ministry, now it might be good to turn off the light.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes?
I could easily see how a person, when you mentioned it, I could see how some people would want to conceal their faith, especially Islam today. Or maybe a Jewish person that was older from a different generation that understood the Holocaust or was close to it, very closely related. So if let's say you have a patient like that, but they do want a chaplain, how do you handle that? If they don't want to share that with you, or is it even important?
Well, that's a good question, and when I get to making the introductions when you come in, one of my learning, what they call growing edges, is I, as an interfaith person, really think it's unimportant, but it is really important because what if you die and the person dies, the patient dies, and you don't know what their faith is, they may miss being taken care of in ways that are extremely meaningful for them. So knowing the person's faith is not really about power or categorizing, it's about providing sensitive, appropriate care. So my learning edge, the current hospital that I just finished yesterday, Mount Sinai Roosevelt, the census was impoverished, and it was part of my job to learn what the person's faith was, and I often didn't ask. That was and remains a growing edge for me.
Well, now that you opened up this can of worms, I really see that people could get very anxious to being asked that question on admittance because what do you want to know? What if I tell you I'm an agnostic or an atheist? Or are you trying to suggest that I'm going to die?
Exactly.
And that's the main reason that I might be very apprehensive with that kind of approach, especially when you walk in. It's bad enough they ask for all your cards before they even let you go upstairs.
And your clothes. And your money.
It's like going to the going into prison.
Exactly. So thank you. These were important comments. This is someone falling from earth into an abyss, and usually chaplains are around when the worst has happened, typically. It's also called pastoral care, but a person who has the title pastor may not know at all what being a chaplain is. One of the members of the CPE interns with me was a pastor, and his growing edge was knowing the difference between ministering and being a chaplain, which is very different.
Are you going to tell us?
Yes. So, one definition of pastoral care is to integrate theological reflection with religious heritage in ways that enable patients to respond more effectively, both spiritually and contextually, when dealing with paralyzing circumstances, physical, spiritual, or emotional crises, and issues around death and dying. So if you have an association with chaplains with dire circumstances, that's usually when they're there. However, I do need to say, as a CPE intern, I was assigned to a unit and I was expected to do rounds, like doctors do rounds. So that means visit as many patients as I can. There was never a day that I was able to visit every patient on my unit. But one of my units, this unit, was labor and delivery. And I was first astounded that I was assigned to labor and delivery. But bad things happen there. Bad things happen there. But the most, I was dealing with a culture where the nurses were extremely protective, where one day when I was first there, I had entered a room and gave my introduction, which I will explain to you. And the patient was absolutely fine with me being there. We were having a conversation. The nurse walked in. I said, "Hi, I'm Chaplain Ruth," because I was still getting to know everybody. She left the room. When I left the room, I was hailed from the nurses, "Chaplain Ruth, who are you? Who called you? What is going on? What are the papers you fill in?" Whenever a chaplain was there, it meant death, only death. And they didn't understand rounding. And so the nurse walked in and thought something terrible had happened to her patient that she didn't know about, and was in terror. So a lot of my work on labor and deliver was explaining to everybody what a chaplain does.
But Bruce, I would imagine you're being approached like that by the nurses. And you yourself started to think, what's going on here? Why am I being... Because their anxiety was pouring out, and it was hitting you like a ton of bricks. Did you have a reaction to that?
Yes, I did.
Did you know that they were in a state of acute anxiety?
Absolutely, I did. But it's still agitated. I was agitated. I stayed there for a little bit longer, but then did need to go and calm myself afterwards, just because of the strength of the emotions that were going on. Okay, get back. Okay. I'm not going to do this slide because I have limited time, so let's go on. Okay, start of my journey. Some people may recognize this slide, but this is a change in career, and when I decided to change, I volunteered. I first volunteered at a hospice, a home hospice, and also at a hospital in the Department of Pastoral Care. And when so I got training in being a friendly visitor, being a spiritual visitor, being an end-of-life doula, which means sitting a vigil when someone is actively dying. And when I went to the hospital, I was given very little training. I was given the census. I was Monday morning, which meant I got all of the new admits from the weekend and Monday. So I had the least number of patients I was designated for me to visit was 35, up to 70 people.
A day?
That day, I went Mondays. I was told to introduce the pastoral care department. If someone wanted to talk to me, I could go with it, but I was not a chaplain. I was still a volunteer. But I was given a little badge and allowed to go anywhere in the hospital except labor and delivery. That was the one floor I was. And I was even allowed in pediatrics and got pediatrics. There was a Jewish volunteer. She did all the Jewish patients. There was a Catholic priest. He did all of the Catholics. So this, I got everybody else, which I was excited about. Oh, wait. Let me just catch up with myself.
Do you have enough light, Ruth?
Huh?
Do you need more light?
Nope. Okay, so this is how I felt walking around, that I was barely keeping my nostrils above the water, that I was at times I would stop and say, what am I doing? Is this really me here walking around? Am I really gonna walk in that person's room, not knowing who that person is? It was shocking, scary, it was an adventure. So, and one thing I did to prepare myself, which part of my spiritual training taught me, was I started to collect prayers and carrying a notebook. And I would pray before I went into the room. And I would pray walking around the halls. And I was the crazy lady talking to myself all the time as I was walking around. So, so a couple of stories from there. I since learned that chaplains typically do not do, in my experience, the way I was taught in CPE, do not read from the scripture or Psalms. The priest does, but it's what I was taught was spontaneous prayer, custom-made prayer. And so my collecting, thank God I didn't have to carry a suitcase of prayers and find, at the moment of stress, the right prayer for the right person. But anyway, one of my stories is I was in the room and it was a woman patient, middle-aged, black. She was sitting in her chair and she was sort of sitting. I went in and there was an aide there cleaning the room, and of course I still took advantage of opportunities to flee if I had them, and she was asleep. And so I said to the aide, she's asleep. And the aide went, no, she's not. She's awake. Go ahead. And I said, but she's asleep. I'm not allowed to wake up anybody who's asleep. And so she took a metal container and dropped it. And the lady woke up. So I did have a patient to speak with. And so I introduced myself, and she did want prayer. And so I pulled out one of my prayers, and as I'm reading it, I'm editing it. Oh, I didn't want to say that.
No.
I didn't want to say that. Wait, I want this part. This is not right. And I'm saying the prayer aloud and trying to think at the same time, not too well. And so I ended up having these interjections of, wait, I didn't mean to say that. And things like that. So I said, oh no, I really messed up this visit. It's terrible. It's horrible. Oh. But the lady thanked me and I left. And the next week I came and the aide grabbed me and pulled me into a room and she said, I want you to pray for me too.
Oh. She heard it.
Yes. She was there. She stood there and listened the whole time. I mean, she was there, and I guess what I thought was horrible was touching for her.
Right.
So one thing I've learned from the Bhagavad Gita and from other sources is you don't know what's good and what's bad and let go of it. I ask that the divine be with me and guide me, and I just do my best with that. And there's a not knowing to this. Okay, so next, please. So then, my next step, yes, I had applied for CPE, and that's when I first found out that Course in Miracles was not a religion, because I was rejected, because I did not have a known faith, recognized faith. And he said, how can I send you to people when I don't know who your ethics, your governing body is? I can't take on that responsibility. And I actually felt that he was incredibly insightful and did me a favor, though it was crushing at the time. I did not feel good about being rejected. But when I finally was accepted, I went to my first hospital was Memorial Sloan Kettering, and that was how I felt at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Memorial Sloan Kettering is a cancer center. Just everybody who's there has cancer. And so everyone, some people had been in and out of there enough times, 17 visits with 4 or 5 different kinds of cancers, and knew that they could overcome the cancer and keep on living, but there's fear associated, usually.
I'm wondering if you should just pause for a minute and tell them when you say I was rejected from, I'm not sure everybody knows what CPEs are.
No, I was just going to ask.
I'm going to be saying,
okay.
I'm going to be saying, thank you though, clinical pastoral education, and it's a major part of being prepared as a chaplain. Thank you very much.
And it's done at hospitals.
I'm sorry, you weren't accepted at first because A Course in Miracles is not an organized religion, but you were eventually accepted. What changed that?
So every supervisor interviews you, and it's the supervisor's choice. So the second supervisor who interviewed me was willing. She had heard of A Course in Miracles, but she was willing to, as I describe clinical pastoral education, I'll describe what it's a large part of it is understanding your, the espoused theology of your religion. So what the Bible says for us, for me, what A Course in Miracles says, because that's my espoused theology, and then your operational theology, which is as you're walking the halls and meeting with patients and families and staff, how much traction, how much does your theology help you as you're in reality? Does your espoused theology help you as you're ministering with people under grave circumstances?
Did you have to convince that person of that?
No, and I have had another CPE unit since then, but to this day she will say to me, it was Rabbi Bonita, she will say to me, I think you're going to start running into walls without having a formal religion. I think I would give you a great reference. I would say that you're learning the skills and you would be a servant, be a good person to serve, but most people hire certified chaplains. And you're going to run into brick walls as you follow your career path in terms of opportunities. And she's right. She's right.
Does that mean that you've run into a brick wall?
I have run into brick walls.
So how do you handle it?
I will get to that.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to stop talking in terms of, I guess I will say is you never know what you will meet when you come in. It's very important to not make assumptions, but that's a training process. It's very hard not to go in there with, it's what you do, really. So one day I'm sitting at the nurses' station on one of the floors in Memorial Sloan Kettering, and the nurses had gotten to know me by this point, and the nurse comes running up. Come, There is a guy actively trying to commit suicide in his room right now. And I just sat there for, it felt like a minute. It was probably much less than that, but I wasn't ready to jump up and run. That was a situation I didn't feel prepared. I didn't know what I was going to do, and yet they saw me as someone meant to be there at that moment. So it was a challenging.
So what happened?
He was there with his daughters, and he was trying to strangle himself with this string in his sweatpants. After much discussion and with the daughters afterwards, and I had met him before. What I learned also with this patient is I met him, and the stories they tell you, like within a minute of you walking in the door, turn out to have the most significance. And you learn this by, not always of course, but you learn this through your verbatims. A verbatim is when you've made a visit, you write a play about your visit. You remember as well as you can what happened. You set the scene, you describe the character, you say what the diagnosis is, and then it's a play. There's a chaplain's role, the patient's role, anyone else who comes in role, and you read it. And I have one with me, if I have time to share it, one of my verbatims. But he told the story of a friend of his who got very sick, and his wife didn't want him to come home to take care of him. And he eventually, very rapidly, allowed himself, through not eating and other ways, to die because the situation was so hard to bear for him. So he's telling me a story about his friend, and I did not, this was my first CPE, I didn't clue in until he had tried to commit suicide that this was him. And he was worried about being a burden. His culture was Hispanic, and he didn't want his daughters to have to take care of him, his wife to have to take care of him. I think he knew that the string in his sweatpants was not going to kill him, but it was his way of showing the significance of the pain he was in. And I believe, I don't know if this is true, but I believe that he was a risk. From what I've learned, a little bit of what I've learned, men who say they want to commit suicide usually end up being successful if it's not attended to. More than women who are more amenable and will say it. Men are a bit more at risk. So I was nervous when he went home. I was nervous for him.
But Ruth, if I ask, what did you do as an
Okay, so I went in, the daughters were there, I came in, the nurse was there, the people started flooding into the room. I do think what I represented to him as a chaplain, I think he was, perhaps this is all what I think. It's not what he's thinking, it's what I was thinking. I think he was a little embarrassed that a person of God was there while he was trying to commit suicide. Also, a doctor came in. My experiences with doctors at MSK was that I had wonderful, very rare bad experiences, mostly wonderful experiences. And the doctor was very, very kind and acknowledged his pain and said, you know, listened to him, heard what he was saying, which was wonderful. And so that stopped, and he for the rest of the time he was there, which was for a while, and I visited him a number of other times, he really was working on reaching a different place than that point of sadness. But I was just one of a bunch of people. I did speak. I don't even remember what I said. It was a tough situation. It was a tough situation.
And not all of yours. I think it'd be really important to say there's a fine line between being a chaplain and being a therapist. And there are times when, as a chaplain, you have to say, I will sit with you, I will hold your hand, I will be here, and the therapist is on the way, you know, because that is not our purview. So.
Yes, I agree.
And
there was one lady I met who said to me, she started talking about her feelings and said, it's so hard for me to talk about my feelings because I'm afraid when I start, I won't be able to stop crying. The nurses hated this lady. She was always curmudgeon-y and cranky and angry and...
My favorite.
Right. And so I said to the nurse, I said, I think she needs a psych eval because she told me when she's so sad, she's afraid if she starts crying, she won't stop. So, yes, when I'm together enough and remember to say those things, I'm very proud of myself, and that is definitely, there is a place for everybody on the team, not just Chaplain.
I don't mean to interrupt on this, but this is to get back to what you were just saying. I see it almost as a team situation. In other words, it doesn't have to be just the chaplain, and certainly not just the psychotherapist, because psychotherapists can be scared to death of death, of dying. So they might be useless in the situation, and they are called in on an emergency and feel very inadequate. And the chaplain tends to be more trained in that way. So I see the value of having even a Course in Miracles person whose attitude towards death and dying is very different.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
I had that happen. We had to call in security to stop the person. Security came in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And then I in hospice had at a staff meeting where the nurse said, I'm terrified he's going to kill himself. And I was new to this particular hospice and said, I'm really confused. Like where our line is, I mean, this is a whole different conversation. But I was like, you need to explain to me where the problem here is. Because I wasn't quite sure where the problem was.
Right.
You know, like security in at a hospice situation would offend me tremendously.
Well, I was
yeah, no, but there's weeks of conversation around that topic.
I bet. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So this is where. I'm going to quickly go through the logistics of becoming a chaplain, just because it is hard to be a certified chaplain. There are places who take people. Visiting Nurse Service of New York will take someone with 2 CPE units and a theology degree, which is what I count what I got here, being a minister and interfaith. So there are places who will take you, but you're the last one on their list. They would rather get a certified chaplain. They would rather have a Master's of Divinity. So not only is it a Master's of Divinity, but it's from an accredited school with certain course requirements. 4 units of CPE are required. Ordination and endorsement from a recognized faith group. What do I mean recognized? They have a list. So I was interested in the Unity Church. Wendy, that's why I called you. And I called professionalchaplains.org, the people there, and said, is Unity a recognized faith? Because in a way, to help myself get more accepted and maybe get a job, I was hoping that would be it. It's not. It's not. But you may be able to, some few people, there are what they call, I'm forgetting the word, but you could you can prove that you've had it's equivalency. You can prove that you've done the equivalent. And if you can do that, they'll give you credit for it. 2,000 additional hours of chaplain works, 2 verbatims, and more. And I have with me the requirements, an application. I'm not going to hand it out now, but if anyone's interested, I can show you what's required to become a chaplain.
Ruth, I just want to say something about the requirements. We've had a number of students over the years go through our Masters of Divinity program, which is not directly through all faiths. We are an affiliate of Commonwealth Open University, which is an accredited school. And we've had a lot of phone calls back, that these the chaplaincy schools are rejecting this idea of interfaith. However, recently, one of our graduates, Sonia Echeverria, who's in South Florida, she contacted me and said that the school that rejected her actually had a change of mind. And they are now accepting this idea of interfaith. So it's groundbreaking because it was a word that, they were putting their, hand up. If you're not Jewish, Islam, or Christian, Catholic, it doesn't count. But now, all of a sudden, I think things are going to start to change.
I can tell you that that's the case in the military as well. A few years ago, interfaith wasn't recognized at all, and just Catholic, Presbyterian, Lutheran, check the boxes, and now it is. So things do change.
Okay. So now finally, I'm at what have I learned about being a chaplain? What is it? What have I been taught about being a chaplain? Actually, I'm going to start with the pastoral strategies. Actually, I'll start with the introduction. When I walked into the room, I was told I needed to introduce myself. I had to actually memorize it, so it would become habit, and everybody, you do this with everybody, because some people are really afraid when they hear the word chaplain. So my introduction is, hi, I'm Chaplain Ruth. I'm the chaplain working on this, assigned to this unit. So I've said chaplain twice. People, when they're anxious, don't always hear the first time. I am making my rounds. This is just a routine visit. I thought I would stop by to say hello and ask how you're feeling today. Again, how you're feeling today. It's not how you're doing, what illness you have, it's how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. So being a chaplain is very much going to the feeling part. The other thing is the pastoral strategies. And all of this I learned in the clinical pastoral education unit. The pastoral strategies are do no harm, encourage the person to say their truth, walk a little while with the person in their suffering, and create, let's see, maybe I don't use the exact word. Lend her or him, lend them my voice in a spontaneous custom-made prayer. So, especially the person in my unit who is a pastor in the church, gives sermons every Sunday. He had a really hard time not being a minister. So when you go into the room, and this is where it seems backwards. You are going to the glass half full. Many family members, even the patient themselves, don't want to really be talking about what's really going on and what they're feeling. And family don't let them say the truth. I'm afraid I'm going to die. I'm afraid I'm never going to be able to come home again. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to work. There's a lot of losses that people experience on the way to death. It's not just the loss of your life. And of course for the family, if it's me that's sick, my husband would lose a wife. But I'm losing everybody when I die. I lose everything. So we go to the glass half full, and encouraging somebody to say their truth is saying something, like I said earlier, if I was asked what I felt like by being in the hospital, I might say, okay, let me give a different example. If there's a woman in the room who is just learned that her baby is dead inside her and that she's going to have to give birth to it, and I walk in the room And I see she's crying, but she's also talking on the phone. And so I introduce myself like I do all the time. I ignore the fact that the nurse has told me not everything, of course, but background information. I give her a chance to say no. I mean, part of the introduction, and it's one of the few places patients have the power to say no to the care they're getting. But with her, I said, I see your tears. I see you crying. Could you tell me what your tears are about? So that's one opening. Or another is, from what you've told me, what I've heard you say about what's going on, I might be heartbroken. I wonder what it feels like for you. So I've learned to be very mindful of my language. I am not putting my emotion on them. I am sharing an emotion that is negative. So I'm giving them permission to say their truth. And I'm also giving them permission to name their truth. For me, it would have, as I put my feelings on what I heard, tried them on, I might be heartbroken. I may not have the words to feel, or I might feel numb. There's a lot of, it's what I'm feeling that she might feel. And then she has the opportunity, no, I'm not feeling that at all, or yes. And then it encourages her to say her truth. And the truth, it can be really surprising. One lady in this situation also said, I don't know what I'm going to tell people. I was showing, and now there's going to be no baby. And what do I say to them? For me, I wouldn't have been thinking about that particularly, but this was one of the first things she was thinking about, is how am I going to deal with the real world when I go back out, you know. So that's, and then encourage them to elaborate or to walk with them a bit in their suffering, whatever it is, being present and not trying to comfort, which is surprising. You think actively comforting or fixing it or giving strategies. Nowhere in the pastoral strategies does it say fix it. Nowhere. I was just with a patient who was in because he had just gone on a binge, drinking alcohol. He had been accused of a crime, had lost his job because of it. He's innocent. He was going to be going to court. No one in his family would help him. He wanted to kill himself. And on top of that, he had lost his faith in God. He was telling me. And there was an aide, one-on-one, he had one-on-one aide because he wanted to commit suicide. The aide is sitting not even 2 feet away from me, listening to every single word. I felt really uncomfortable with that because I wasn't fixing it. I wasn't saying nice things. It was really hard for me to hold to the pastoral strategy. And to my shock and amazement, after the custom-made prayer, he looked up with a big smile through the tears and said, "Thank you so much. That helped me." And all I thought is I had been mean and went to the worst places imaginable, and that's what he wanted. That's what he wanted. What he needed, or that's what chaplains are meant to do at that time. Yes.
I just want to know what IS and IP
Sure.
are.
I was just going to say that. So part of clinical pastoral education unit is you have 300 hours of clinical work and 100 hours of group work, which is the educational unit. Me as an academic, I thought that would be a lecture and I would have to do reading. It was the farthest thing from that. It was group work. Individual supervision, so I had to write reflections every week and talk with my supervisor about it. And interpersonal relations. My fellow CPE interns are gifts to me. They're also learners, but they're also people I can learn to. For me, interpersonal relations was how a patient would feel. For me, I felt like what I think a patient would feel. I was able to say my truth and have the CPE interns walk with me in my suffering and learn a lot about myself and be honest in a very kind way. I think it's really hard for people to be truly honest. And that's the gift of my fellow CPE interns. So Kathleen, how am I doing for time? Should I be stopping?
We have like five more minutes.
What does the group work entail?
So the group work, we do verbatims, which is the writing the play of an actual visit. And when you go in there, you're not allowed to tape it. You're not allowed to take notes. Nothing. You go outside and you sit down and you write as fast as you can to remember as much as you want. One of the most important things that happened, that I learned this unit, is that we learn about countertransference. So when you go in and you're with a patient, there's transference. The patient sees you perhaps as a person of God and puts onto you their feelings about God, and they react to you as they would in that way. But countertransference is when the patient is touching my story. And I'm making assumptions, and I'm responding to the patient as if the patient's my mother or my brother or something like that.
Not nearly as detailed or as well organized as this, obviously, or the education, but I had a little Yorkshire Terrier, and she had a therapy dog license, and I got trained as a volunteer in the hospital and would go around to people's rooms on a list, a very short list of people that wanted pet visits and bring the dog. Many people who would stop me in the hallway and, can you come see my mother, can you come see my kid, and staff especially. We spend probably 2/3 of our time with staff.
I believe it. That's
On the
something I'd
way
like
to
to
the
do.
room. What's that?
That's something I'd like to do, is do the pet therapy.
Yeah, so, but it's gotta be very rewarding. I mean, I found it very rewarding
Yes.
to do
It
that
is.
service, volunteer.
I was in a hospital room once where a woman came in to play a harp
Yes.
to the patient.
Very nice. Yeah, there are different.
Similar.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to countertransference because it's really important. So the bad side of countertransference is that I'm relating to the patient unconsciously and acting out my issues with the patient. But countertransference is going to always exist, and there's a positive way of using it, which is being aware that touching my story here, when I worked with homeless patients, that really scared me, and I was very fearful around the idea of homelessness. That was my thing. But what it becomes is a way for you to connect with the patient, feel connected. As soon as you feel connected, then you can, the patient feels it, they may feel connected, and a dialogue can really start flowing and things can start happening. I think I'd like to just hand out one other thing, something quickly. A very big, important part of, and I think people are going to have to share, two people per handout.
Primarily let the students take it first, the current students first.
And we'll say, put one on the internet for the correspondence.
Yeah, make sure I get Ruth, make sure you send me,
Yeah, could I have one?
No.
So,
I think you got two.
okay, thank you.
if you could email both the PowerPoint as well as the handouts.
Sure.
People are asking for it.
Okay. So the important thing is, part of CPE is, this is considered a religious, clinical pastoral education is considered religious or faith-based. And everything you do, every reflection has to be about your theology and how your theology helps you as a chaplain, so this is part of my final evaluation, which again, it's not the teacher giving me an evaluation, it's me giving me an evaluation. It's a self-evaluation, asking a lot of questions, and here it's articulate central themes of my religious choice, and the theological understandings that inform my chaplaincy. And I am in relation to this goal because through these units you develop. So this, I'm a Course in Miracles, I consider my theology a Course in Miracles, so this is what I wrote in terms of how a Course in Miracles, how I use it to make sense during the visit. Would it be helpful if I read this, or?
Yes, that would be nice, yes.
Okay. I'm going to skip the first paragraph. My theology provides me with guidance for my chaplaincy. A Course in Miracles, ACIM, promises me that I am never alone. A Course in Miracles also promises me that my call for help will always be answered. A Course in Miracles tells me we are all one with each other and God. We are as God created us. We are all worthy. Since I am already one with my sisters and brothers, it is important that I remember it and feel it, so that the client can be the patient, family, staff, can know it too. I need to go into the room and connect with our oneness, see our perfection and God's love in us. We are all special. We are all precious children of God. Patients are not their illness or their history. They are so much more than that. My recognition of the divine in them hopefully brings my sisters and brothers to a different place, awareness, feeling. The eternal in us does not die. Thus, there is no need to fear death. The miracle is a change in perception. The miracle lets us know, through arriving at different perceptions, that our perceptions, stories, dreams, and experiences are illusions and dreams instead of the eternal. Our dreams get us to a point that we decide to choose for God. Fear takes us directly to hell on earth. Awakening to God reminds us that we can have heaven on earth. Salvation, or this awakening, comes from forgiving our sisters and brothers and thereby healing them and ourselves. Though this may not be considered pure A Course in Miracles, thus it's my operational A Course in Miracles, I do this in the room by connecting with and acknowledging our overlapping, individualized curricula, our dreams. It is through the acknowledgement of the client's sacred stories. It is by listening to and hearing profoundly their stories and dreams. It is through these actions that I can connect and bridge to the eternal. In this individualized curriculum, I am connecting with the patient by using my emotions, residing in my body, a tool in the curriculum, and being present. I am connecting with the patient's story without getting caught up in it, hopefully. By being in the now, by using my body as a tool for the holy and connecting, I am open to other possibilities, perhaps things I cannot even imagine. My prayer assists me in this process. I want to enter the room representing A Course in Miracles through my being without saying any words about A Course in Miracles at all. I want to be love and love. I want to enter into a holy relationship with my sisters and brothers. A huge part of the work in a clinical pastoral education is this kind of work. So, and that is, any questions?
How you separate your emotion from the patient? Because interacting with patient, you have relationship. How do you separate your personal feeling from the partner?
So the answer from me is I can't really separate. We're one, according to my theology, but it's the counter-transfers type thing that I was talking about. It's recognizing what's coming from my individualized curriculum, from the patient's individualized curriculum, and using it as a point of connection. I will be emotional about it. It's using my emotions as a place for connecting and being enabling the person to say their truth and to walk with them in their suffering. And there's a huge amount of self-care that's involved, because you do, with all the emotions you're feeling, you do need to take care of yourself. It's a critical part of the work.
Do you find yourself tearing up when you're praying with people?
Not usually. But that's me. Other people do it differently.
What was the question?
Do I
Does
find
she tear
myself
up?
tearing up,
Tearing.
crying?
Would you be concerned if you did feel so inclined?
I think there are probably moments that it's appropriate.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But it may not be helpful to the patient who is afraid of the strength of their feelings if I am emoting all of my feelings too.
Yeah, but if you see them emoting, it's okay if you join them in emoting.
I don't know. Some of my patients really didn't want to go to tears, and it would have been really hard for them if I started crying.
Well, I'm not talking about, I don't think you were either, I just like in a sobbing mode.
No, it's
No,
just
just-
like your eyes get wet.
Well
Just
up,
welling up.
well up rather than
Yeah, that's,
pouring.
Glass of water.
Glass of water.
Okay, yeah, glass of water. I think you're right back there.
Larry?
I don't have any of your training to do this, but like you, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, so it just seemed to me that, let's say when that hurry up, there's somebody committing suicide in the next room, and, oh my God, am I ready for this? Through A Course in Miracles, even without that training, I think the training that I have would go to the last lesson, or last actually 5 lessons of the workbook. At that moment, I would have to say, this holy instant what I give to you, Holy Spirit. Be you in charge, and I will follow you. And knowing that your direction will bring me peace, and bring this person peace. And then have the confidence that it's not you anymore, And then I wouldn't be so scared. That would take the fear out of it for me.
Right. I do that sort of thing. That's
Yeah.
my hope,
Well,
but I still end up getting afraid. I've gotten better. Yes.
I heard somebody once comment that chaplaincy is much like psychological first aid as opposed to therapy. You had mentioned the fine line between therapy and chaplaincy. And of course, as a chaplain, you're qualified to provide that psychological first aid, but certainly not in-depth intervention because you just wouldn't have the training or the expertise to do it. So to be there in the moment.
Well, in the hospital, I would say that's mostly true, though I have developed long-standing relationships with patients over months, so that it could be called that, but in a hospice situation where someone could be there 6 months or more, it's more than just, I would say 95% of the patients are 1 or 2 visits and not therapy and counseling.
And ours involves the extended family, which
Yes.
brings in all sorts of, where the theology of someone becomes important because they might in fact be looking for recognizable ritual.
Right.
There's really 2 roles. There's the compassionate, caring conversations that happen, but there's also a search for recognizable rituals that will bring comfort to the extended family.
Cheyenne, there's time.
Yes, my time is
Thank you.
down.
Well, we'll definitely have you back for more time.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Ruth. It was wonderful.
We're not going to take a break. I think we only
Not?
have 50 minutes to do 2 presentations. So.
Yeah, why,
Karen will